All right, so the next exercise we're going to do is the virus. This is a combination of several effects together. So we start with the background, we sort of reveal this text, but as you can tell, it's not just wiping on, it's doing some sort of weird, sort of organic sort of wipe that's enlarging and becoming more solid, which is cool. And then inside that, I've got a texture of sort of swirling colors. And once we sort of get used to how pretty that actually kind of is, then from the center of those words, things start to turn black. And it's as if the virus is infecting the text and eventually overtakes the text completely and makes it go full black. So we have a couple of things happening at the same time. We are revealing text in a way where we haven't done before, and it's not just a mask where we did sort of a simple shape. It's not that. We're going to base it on something else. So that's new. We're filling our text with something other than the color of the text we originally typed. So that's new. And we're letting an effect go from one look to a second look, which is back to solid, and it brings it to the color I actually used when I made the letters, which was black. So several things we're combining to do one very cool sort of organic effect. And I'm going to show you how to do it. So let's create a new composition, new comp. It's also Command N or Control N on a PC. And I am going to call this the virus because I think it's reasonably memorable that way. I'm going to put a 3 on it because I happen to have several of them. You don't have to do that. All right, so first thing we need to do is go get the footage that we're going to be using. So if you don't already have it, I would go ahead and right click into the gray area or do File New and do a new folder and call it Clips. And once you have a folder to put them in, we're going to select that folder. Mine are already in, so that's why I'm not doing everything that I'm describing. But once you have a folder for clips to go into, then with it selected, you can go File, Import, File. And although we're going to do multiple files, you don't have to choose multiple files, at least not on a Mac, to get it to work. All right. So you should have a folder of stuff that you downloaded and unzipped from my download location. And it looks like it has like a dozen or so clips of video in there. Mine's labeled something different. Don't pay attention to that. So I guess I could navigate to the exact folder you had just so that it doesn't look confusing. Class media, week 9 online. There it is. So yeah, G and E, graphics and effects, week 9 online media is what you should have downloaded. And there are a bunch of clips in there. And if, especially on a Mac, you should be able to click on the first one, hold down Shift and select the bottom one. And that will give you a range of files. And then you can open them and they should import in. We've done this several times before. I'm not going to obsess over it, but let's get all the elements in that we want to work with. All right, so the first thing we want to do is put our St. Louis background in here. So you can, if you don't want to dig through all the files that you just imported, remember we can search across an entire project. And the reality is there's only one clip that is labeled St. Louis, but it doesn't have the period after the Saint. So it's not actually a very good search word. I'm going to tell you that if you just search for the word sun, you will get it narrowed down to the one that has a sunset going on in it. And it will leave you with only one clip. And we're going to drop it down here into the bottom, thus putting it into our new comp as our background. Now, our comp is 10 seconds. If we use the default length, it should have been 10 seconds. Now, you're on a new computer, possibly, than what we've been using, so we probably should double check that. So I took it for granted when we were doing the previous exercise, or exercises, but you can get back to your composition settings by doing Command K on a Mac, Control K on a PC, or you can go up to the composition menu and go composition settings. And here you can double check that your piece is at least 10 seconds long. I would set it for 10 because that's essentially what we're going to need it to be. Most of the other examples we've done have happened over the course of 2, 3, 4 seconds at most. This is one of the longer ones, so we want to make sure we have at least 10 seconds to play with. 23976 for your frame rate is still okay. 1920 1080 is still the size and shape we want to be. So we didn't talk about this before, but if you're on a different machine, don't assume that these are set right. If you were still in the classroom where it was set by our last exercise, we would have not have think about it. But just like my computer here is set to whatever I did last. All right, so everybody's got their comp set to the right settings and has put the first piece of footage, our background footage, into the timeline. So the next thing I need to do is I need to type the word that I'm going to reveal. So let's hit the old texting or titling tool. Let's click somewhere over here and let's type the virus. That's so charming. Not at all what I want, right? It's based on the last thing that I did. I'm gonna scale it down a little bit. I'm gonna find a different font. I'm just gonna pick something now because I want it to change. It's not changing. Give me something else. There we go. I do kind of like all caps for this. You don't have to do it, but I think it looks a little more dramatic to be all tall caps. I also like the taller fonts for this particular exercise. It looks kind of intimidating, but you can go thick. Nothing wrong with that. Here's Helvetica New. Bold. Ooh, that's kind of cool. I'll do that just so that it's different. The point is, if we're going to put a texture inside this, I want it to be pretty obvious that it's there. I want the letters to be thick enough or at least close together enough that I can actually see that colored texture. And I wouldn't make it purple. I'm going to double click in and I'm going to make it black. All right. And for what it's worth, I kind of like having a little bit of stroke on the edge of our black version. And I've actually set mine to a kind of a gray, my stroke color, which is found here. As you can see, it's not on my color palette. It's kind of in the corner. It's not like I'm going bright gray or anything. It's just a little bit different than the black. And I think that looks kind of cool. You do what you think is right, but it's just giving us a slight border that makes it a little more interesting. I also chose this shot because I like the fact that we can sort of split our word in half with the horizon line. So from a design standpoint, that's kind of cool. I am going to possibly go with a different font. I don't know if I want to do this one because I want to waste our time picking fonts. Ooh, that's cool. It's like so thin. You're not going to get a full sense of like what's going on if it's that thin. Now I could go to that font and pick a thicker version. It's kind of cool. Let's do that. All right. So I have this light, nice, big, intimidating movie title looking sort of thing. Now, we already know that we could go in and we could animate this in by adjusting the opacity and just having it fade up. But that's not really dramatic. We want to do something cooler. Yes, we want to wipe it on with a completely different, more organic feeling thing. So if I go back to my original one, I can confirm what that wipe was. We want to load a clip that will give us the wipe effect, and we want to load, let's search for the word burn up in our raw footage, B-U-R-N. And of the 3 clips that come up, the first one that after, it's all labeled the same until about, close to the end of the clip, and then it ends in underscore ERFNE 4. It's the top one of the 3 that should come up. We want to basically take that track and we are going to drop it on top as the top layer now of what we're doing. So as soon as I do that, I can't see anything anymore, but as I scroll over, I can see what happens in that clip, which is this weird sort of ink being spilled or paint being spilled on the camera, and eventually it spills over everything and it becomes totally white. All right, but that is the basis of how we're going to bring on the element that is underneath it. Okay, so we're going to go to the track matte section of the interface down here. Hopefully you can sort of see my mouse. And we are going to change the setting for the virus layer. So the text layer we created is right now the middle track and it is set to none. I am going to change that to be a Luma mat. And when I do that, I am basically telling the software this track is directly related based on luminance or brightness to the track above it. So it's always looking at the track above and saying, okay, I want to use the above layer as a reference. So now if you scroll through your thing, your black text should come on using the luminance information from that spill looking thing to take your text and bring it on. And it looks pretty cool. That already looks kind of neat. But we want to go further. I want it to come on that way, but I want the text inside the text, the texture inside the text to not just be black. So how do we do that? Well, that is a little more complicated. What I'm going to do is I am going to select these two tracks, the top one and the second one, together by holding down Shift so that I can get them both. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to say pre-compose. And what it does is it creates a new composition. It's going to, as soon as I name it, if I want to. I'm going to leave it the default name. I've done 3 of these before now, so mine's putting a 4 at the end. Yours will probably not have a number, or will have 1. But the point is, we're basically creating a new comp that will appear in the place of where these things were. So I'm going to say, yes, the settings here are fine. We want to move the things that we had in this comp to the one we're embedding inside. So the default setting of this being lit up and the others not checked is totally fine. Hit OK. And now you'll notice that those two layers basically mashed together to form your new pre-comp 4. How do I get to that comp? If you double click it, it will load it and you will see it over here. Now this is part of why I do the little bit of edge around it, that little stroke around it, is so that I can kind of see it in here because it ends up being black on black, at least for now. But now what we need to do is we need to get the texture that's going to go inside this. So the texture that goes inside this, if you search the word liquid, L-I-Q-U, there are 2 clips that come up as you start typing liquid. And one of them has a 57 number after the sort of text description. The other one has a 61. We want the 57 number. And that is in fact going to go on the bottom layer of this pre-comp that we are working with now. So the 57 clip goes underneath. So now it looks like what we had when we had the other image of the city has been replaced with the swirly stuff, but that's not what we want, right? We want the swirly stuff inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell, because these again relate to one another in top-down order, we're going to go to that swirly layer and we're going to say under track mat, we're going to say, I want the way this is revealed to be related to the track above it with its alpha. So when I change it to its alpha mat, which is the first of the 4 choices that come up here for following along, it now will allow me to see the text be filled with that texture, which is cool. That's what we want. Double checking my work here. Yep. Okay. So if we go back, this is all inside this little pre-comp, right? This is just happening in there. If I go back, I can once again say I want to bring this pre-comp in related to the track above it. So I can get that, if I want to steal from my pre-comp, this is where I get a little confused. That paint or burn or ink transition that was actually bringing on the text, we can go copy and paste it. I'm going to copy. It's in that pre-comp. It's your top layer in your pre-comp. Go back to your normal comp, paste. Now you have a basis for it to wipe on, but we haven't told it to do the luminance trick again. So I'm going to go to it and say, I want to Luma base this on Luma. So track mat for your pre-comp layer is lumum related to the top one above it. And now you'll see that it in fact reveals the virus the way it was revealing the other one, but we had to pre-comp that texture inside of it. Okay. So we have one problem now. It's doing kind of what we want, but we have to get it to go to black. And our first problem in making it go to black is you'll notice that when the footage runs out of that weird wipey sort of reveal, when it runs out, boom, my text disappears. Well, that's a problem. It's wiping on, but then it needs to sort of stay the way it is at its last frame. And I wish this clip was longer. I run out of clip down here. So there is a way to expand or basically hold. You're expanding the length of the clip by holding the last frame of that clip. So in a sense, the way that it looks on its final frame is what we wish it will stay like the rest of the time, because I don't need it to do any other wiping based on this. I wiped it on, that was its whole purpose, but I can't have it run out because then my text goes away. All right, so how do I do that? You're going to go to the layer menu, and you are going down to the time menu that is like a sub menu of layer. And then you'll notice that there is a choice called freeze on last frame. That's exactly what we're looking for. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do that, and you're going to watch the clip get longer at the bottom of my timeline. You're going to see that track all of a sudden become long enough to cover the full 10 seconds. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Boom. Now it still does its wipe because it's not freezing until it's completely on, and then it's there as long as I need it to be, which is great. We're good to go. Now, a little thing, if you're on a Mac, especially, I don't know on the PC, but like, let's say 3 weeks from now, I'm like, oh crap, how do I freeze the end of a clip? You can go to search and you can type freeze, and at least on a Mac, it's going to give you the choices, and you can go, oh yes, freeze on last frame, and it shows you where it actually is in the program. So in case you're not used to working that way, it's pretty great. And the reality is if I select it here, I don't even have to go to where it's pointing me. I can select it in the pull down menu and it will do that action. But it's a good way to be reminded where something is. So using these little search fields to your advantage will keep you from getting too stuck, at least for too long, on this. All right, so now I've got this animation. It's kind of cool.
Is that just in the help window? Sorry.
That was just help. Yes, thank you for interrupting and asking. I'm glad you asked. I just went to help and I typed in a word that I think is what the menu is going to be called. So let's say I thought it was hold. Toggle hold keyframe. That sounds close to what I want, but I don't think that's it. Let's try freeze. And then yes, sure enough, it's there. And again, if I select it, not only is it going to do it, but it's going to show me before I select it, hey, this is where you can find it next time. So, not to beat the dead horse about the Apple version being a little easier to use, that's just another example. And maybe the PC version can do some of this. I can't speak to that because I don't work on those.
I do not believe PC can do it.
Okay. Yeah, it's super handy. And it works for almost all Apple programs. It's something that is required of companies who want to sell on the Apple platform. They have to follow certain standards. So it works for almost anything running on a Mac. So anyway, we've got this going. Thank you for the feedback on that. I'm glad. We got this going. It's finally wiping on the way we want. The only problem is I want it to basically do another wipe. I want it to wipe once it's come on in color. I want it to wipe to the black and white version. So I need my text layer back because I'm basically going to stack another animation on top of what's happening here so that it can transition from this animation and then wipe on the black animation on top of it. So I need to go get my text and I want it to be exactly right. So I'm going to cheat and I'm going to step into my little pre-comp and I'm going to select my text layer and do Control C or Command C on a Mac to copy it. Then I'm going to step back out to my actual comp and I'm going to do paste or Control V or Command V on a Mac. And now I have my text on top of everything. And if I turn it on, you will see that it is, and I turned it on using the eyeball on the side. If I turn it on, then you can see it basically covers up what's underneath. Now, on the subject of these eyeball tracks, this is kind of important. You'll notice that in the comp, we were using this paint or burn or ink transition, right, to wipe on our virus words. You'll notice that it is turned off in terms of seeing that track. If you turn it on, then the thing that's on that track is completely solid and visible. And we aren't actually ever wanting to see this layer. We're only using it to create the key of the stuff underneath. So I don't know about you guys, but I can be kind of a neatnik and be like, oh crap, something's off over here, and think that I'm supposed to turn on all these eyeballs. But the reality is you don't if you're using it only as a luminance key or as some sort of layered interaction between the track below it. So don't turn it on. If you do, that's why you can't see anything anymore. But if you turn it off, then it is only using it to apply to the transition, and life is good. So it's something that easily can trick you up. If you feel like you've stacked stuff right and you're just not seeing it, maybe one of these, because it's a layer that's only being used to cut a hole, is actually in fact on, and it doesn't need to be. Okay, that's a little redundant, but I want to make sure you understand that concept because it trips me up sometimes too. Because I like to turn everything on. In Premiere, we turn every track on. You know, it's just our way of thinking about it. Okay, so I've got this black text over it, yay. But the problem is, if it's on the whole time, then I never see the cool swirly stuff underneath. So I actually want to use a wipe like I did when we first built it to wipe this stuff on. But let's maybe use a slightly different one than the one we used before. So if you search for the word bloom, B-L-O-O-M, you will get only one layer or clip that comes up. And it says video blocks, responsive, paint, bleed, bloom transition, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but bloom in the search bar will get you there. So if I do that, that is what I'm going to use to do the wipe on of the black version of my text. So if I put it on top, so take it down and make it your top layer. If I put it there, by default, the eyeball turns on for that layer. And of course, you don't get to see anything happen, which is not what I want. But if I turn the eyeball off, okay, well, at least now I can see the old stuff. What do I do now? Well, you make sure that your virus layer, your text layer, is set to Luma, meaning it's going to use the, I'm sorry, not Luma. It's going to be the opposite. We want Luma inverted. My mistake. What is Luma inverted? Well, as you saw when the track was on, this scene doesn't start in black and reveal a blob of white. It starts in white and reveals a blob of black. So we need it to be an inverted version of that to do the key the way we want. So once you have it set to Luma inverted on the track that is just your text where it says the virus, if you set it to that, now you will notice that the first reveal comes on, and just a second or two after that, the black will start to bleed in as it wipes that effect on and overtakes the image so that the colored stuff gets pushed away. Now, you'll notice that over the course of 10 seconds, which is the entirety of our comp, we can't quite get all the wipe to go away. Well, again, if I turn on the eyeball, that's because the blob is not filling the screen enough. It's only wiped on this much, so the V and the I are over here somewhere, and it's not being filled with black. So the easiest way to make sure that it gets filled with black would be to scale this up. So I'm going to click on that top layer, hit the letter S to get my scaling capabilities back, and I'm going to zoom in. Now I'm going to zoom it in halfway just to show you. So this is me almost all the way zoomed in. Now if I turn that layer off so it's back to just being a key, you can see that there's a lot less colored stuff showing. And if I continue to scale it up, eventually all that colored stuff goes away because I'm changing the size of the hole it's cutting. All right, so just take it park on the end of your timeline and make it to where it is finally completely no color inside your text. And then you know you're good. Now, if I play it, it does its first reveal. It does its second sort of rotting and becoming infected to black. And by the end, if you zoomed it to the right scaling point, by the end, there should be no color left. And you should have a strictly black word. Now, I'm not going to have you do it because we've already done a little of it anyway. But if I wanted this text to come flying at us so that it was really even more dramatic, I have a lot of layers going on here, right? It's gotten to be a little cumbersome. I could create a null layer, put it on top, and then route all the different versions of viruses and backgrounds, basically everything except for my sunset skyline shot. I could do the little, connect it to the null trick, and then I can adjust the scaling on the null, and it'll give me a cool animation where the text comes at us. All right. But that's another reason why nulls become helpful, because if I tried to go in and scale these effects, I would eventually get out of sync between the filled in version of my text and the black version of my text would end up most likely not matching and it wouldn't look right. I need them to be apply an effect to both of these versions of it together to look the way I want. So this is a great opportunity to use null, and I could do anything with null. I could have the virus words. I was talking about having them forward, but I could null it and have it slide in from the left or come up from the bottom, whatever I want to do. But the point is, there's a whole way too many things to try to just get them to move together. It's never going to work. You need to use, you need to use null and a null to do it. But we've done a little bit of that. So I'm not feeling like I got to walk you through that, but I wanted to make that point. Before I stop recording, is there anybody with a question that should go on record? All right, I'm going to stop recording.